If you noticed my silence, Mr. Chairman, it's because I had no intention to inflict an introductory speech on this distinguished audience. I simply like to answer any questions that are put to me, but silence is illegitimate, no matter what are the convictions invoked on its behalf. This is an international matter of great concern, illustrated by the fact that the Secretary General of the United Nations inscribed it for consideration at the recent session of the
Mr. Eban, what was your reaction to the way that Britain voted at the United Nations last week?
A word about the resolution itself. Since the Arab states and their constant and inveterate supporters are about 40% of the General Assembly, it's quite obvious that 40% of the total Arab case is going to be expressed in resolutions. Since this is predetermined, I didn't feel it necessary to go to that assembly at all. But we think it's an unconstructive resolution. The only thing to be said in its favour is that at a previous point it was even more unconstructive, and some of the more explosive and dangerous elements were removed by the West European countries, including Britain. But even as it stands, it was not worth voting for. It has nothing to say about a negotiated peace, about agreement, and it is full of one-sided criticism. If there were to be genuine criticism, there should have been censure of the Arab states for refusing to negotiate peace and for supporting terrorism and war. We wouldn't have asked for this because it's not realistic. But the best thing that the General Assembly should have done, I think, would have been to remove itself from this very incongruous, critical role, incongruous in what is, after all, a forum of public pressures, and simply to look to the future and to call for a negotiated peace. Since it didn't call for this, I think the resolution should not have been supported, and the 50-odd countries who, for different reasons, refused to support it were more correct in their attitude than the 80-odd countries who did.
It's now, 5 years, though. Isn't it time maybe for everyone to shift their attitudes and reassess the situation?
It's time to take the lesson from experience. These 5 years have proved in the Middle East that you cannot get agreement without negotiation, and the past 2 years have proved in Europe, in Germany, in Asia, between China and America, between India and Pakistan, in Korea, in Vietnam, that the breakthrough must always come on the level of communication. In each of those conflicts there has been spectacular progress on a world scale because governments have overcome the taboos and the complexes which prevented them from meeting each other. And once they overcome those complexes, you get substantive progress towards a peaceful settlement. At the heart of the Arab-Israel deadlock, therefore, lies the simple fact that there is a refusal to negotiate.
Or, on your part, a refusal to withdraw, or to give a promise of withdrawal?
That isn't true. We have promised to withdraw to those secure and recognized boundaries that will be determined by agreement in the peace negotiation. But how can you determine boundaries by agreement unless you negotiate that agreement? In other words, the order must be negotiation, agreement, and then implementation of the agreement, including its territorial provisions.
Going back to Britain's support of this resolution, will you be discussing the matter with Sir Alec tomorrow?
I can't imagine that in a survey of all our common interests and preoccupations we shouldn't discuss this as well, although I frankly don't attach very much weight to public rhetoric which repeats itself year by year. I've mentioned 5 or 6 international conflicts in which there has been progress. In every one of them, that progress has been realized outside the United Nations framework for the simple reason that you do not get agreements by methods of polemics or public rhetoric. You only get agreements by reticent negotiation. And if the UN would change its techniques, move the emphasis away from public mudslinging towards a pragmatic exchange of compromise proposals, it would do a great service to itself and to the world. But we would certainly have preferred Britain not to give its support to a resolution that doesn't contain the element of negotiation and that does not contain the balance which unilateral British statements have usually had.
Do you see this as a time of strain between Britain and Israel?
I wouldn't say that, no, because We don't believe that the serious relations between states have to be affected by the parliamentary manoeuvres at the United Nations. There are great things, a great many important things to be done together. Most of them, I think, within the European framework, because Israel is interested in the proposal of a Mediterranean overall settlement, which was proposed by France recently, and which could, if the content of it were worked out properly, be an important development in Israel's relations with the Mediterranean world and with Europe. I must say that's much more prominent in my mind than documents which nobody will have heard about within a week or two from now.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.
Right. Thank you, Joe.
Do you see this as a time of strain?
Sorry. You're exploding a bit.
A bit further.
That's better, yes. Right.
Do you see this as a time of strain between Israel and Great Britain? Will you be talking to Sir Alec tomorrow about the way Britain voted at the UN? It's 5.5 years now, though, and very little has been done to shift the situation. Is it now time that somebody gave ground and came up with a new initiative? But in 5 years, very little has happened. Isn't it time that there was a new initiative? After 5 years, is there no chance, though, of a new initiative? What was your reaction to the way that Britain voted at the UN last week? I don't think I got any more in, actually, but I do.
Relationships between Britain and...
Done that.
Done it?
Yeah.
Do
I'll do a nod.
I get a word in it?
Yes, do a...
Yes, do a fishbowl.